The morning sun was just beginning to peek through the large glass windows of San Francisco International Airport's Terminal 3. It was 6:45 a.m., and the usual buzz of early morning travelers filled the air. Among them was a young woman in her early 30s, dressed in a crisp business suit, pulling her navy blue carry-on suitcase towards Gate 73B. She had always been particular about her travel routine, arriving exactly 2 hours before departure, grabbing her usual coffee from the airport cafe, and methodically organizing her belongings before boarding. Today seemed no different as she waited in line, ticket and ID in hand, ready to board United Airlines Flight 2347 to New York. The gate agent's voice crackled over the speakers, announcing the start of boarding for first-class passengers. The woman watched, tapping her foot impatiently, as travelers in expensive suits and comfortable travel wear made their way through the boarding gate. She kept checking her phone, scrolling through work emails, and occasionally glancing at social media while waiting for her group number to be called. When Group 3 was finally announced, she joined the line, efficiently maneuvering her carry-on through the crowd. As she walked down the jet bridge, the familiar smell of airplane fuel and the cool morning air mixed together. The flight attendant at the door greeted her with a warm smile, checking her boarding pass and directing her toward the back of the plane. Making her way down the narrow aisle, she counted the rows: 20, 21, 22, finally reaching 23. Her window seat awaited, and she quickly stored her carry-on in the overhead compartment, keeping only her laptop bag with her. The seat felt cold through her suit pants as she settled in, immediately reaching for the air vent above to adjust it to her liking. Other passengers continued filing past, a mother trying to calm her crying baby, an elderly couple helping each other store their bags, a businessman typing furiously on his phone. The woman pulled out her own phone, setting it to airplane mode, but not before sending one last text to her office. "Boarding now. Will email updates once I land." The morning light streamed through her window, casting long shadows across the wing. She watched as ground crew members moved efficiently below, loading luggage and performing their final checks. A flight attendant passed by, reminding everyone to fasten their seatbelts and keep their seats in the upright position for takeoff. The familiar safety demonstration began playing on the screens, but like most frequent flyers, she barely paid attention. Instead, she focused on organizing her thoughts for the important client meeting waiting for her in New York. This cross-country flight was supposed to be just another routine business trip. 6 hours of working on her laptop, maybe catching up on some sleep, and preparing her presentation. As the plane began pushing back from the gate, she felt the usual slight nervousness she always experienced during takeoff, though she'd never admitted to anyone. The engines roared to life, and the aircraft began its slow taxi toward the runway. Looking out the window, she watched as other planes waited their turn, their lights blinking in the early morning haze. Little did anyone know that this seemingly ordinary flight would soon become anything but routine. The events that would unfold over the next few hours would not only disrupt the travel plans of everyone on board, but would also spark a national conversation about airline etiquette and passenger behavior in the age of social media. For now, though, Flight 2347 was just one of countless planes taking off across the country that morning. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard and announcing their flight time of 5 hours and 45 minutes to New York. The woman adjusted her seatbelt, took one last look at the San Francisco skyline, and closed her eyes as the plane accelerated down the runway, lifting off into the clear blue California sky. 2 hours into the flight, the atmosphere inside the cabin had settled into that familiar lull that comes with long-haul travel. The soft hum of the engines provided a steady backdrop to the quiet conversations and occasional sounds of passengers shifting in their seats. The morning sun now streamed brightly through the windows, creating patches of warmth across the cabin. The flight attendants had just begun preparing for the meal service, their practiced movements showing years of experience as they efficiently moved their carts down the narrow aisle. The smell of coffee began wafting through the cabin, mixing with the artificial air conditioning scent that's unique to airplanes. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting our meal service shortly," announced a friendly voice over the intercom. "Please ensure your seats are in their upright position and your tray tables are down." Most passengers complied automatically, the familiar routine of air travel ingrained in their minds. But in row 23, something was different. The businesswoman by the window remained reclined in her seat, deeply engrossed in whatever was playing on her laptop. A flight attendant approached her with a gentle smile. "Ma'am, would you mind putting your seat up for the meal service? It makes it easier for the passenger behind you to eat." Without looking up from her screen, the woman muttered something about paying for a reclining seat and continued typing. The flight attendant, maintaining her professional demeanor, tried again. "I understand, but it's just temporary for the meal service. We'll need all seats upright at this time." The woman finally looked up, her expression showing clear annoyance. "I'm in the middle of something important," she said, her voice carrying across several rows. "I'm not hungry anyway, so just skip my row." Other passengers began to take notice of the exchange, some turning in their seats to watch the scene unfold. The flight attendant, still keeping her composure, explained that it wasn't just about her meal, but also about the comfort of the passenger behind her. The situation began to escalate when a second flight attendant came to assist. "Ma'am, this is a standard safety requirement during meal service," she explained calmly. "We need all seats upright." The woman's response grew louder, her words sharp and dismissive. "Do you know how much I paid for this ticket? I'm trying to prepare for an important meeting, and you're harassing me over a seat position." Several nearby passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. A man across the aisle tried to defuse the situation by quietly suggesting that it would only take a few minutes, but this seemed to further agitate the woman. "Oh, so now everyone's an expert on airline policies," she snapped, her voice rising above the engine noise. "I fly this route twice a month. I know my rights as a passenger." The tension in the cabin was palpable now. Parents were distracting their children, trying to keep them from focusing on the growing confrontation. Some passengers put on their headphones, attempting to distance themselves from the uncomfortable scene, while others watched with a mix of concern and curiosity. One of the flight attendants stepped away to speak quietly into the crew phone, while her colleague continued trying to reason with the increasingly agitated passenger. The woman had now pulled out her phone and was pointing it at the flight attendants, threatening to show everyone online how airlines treat their premium customers. What had started as a simple request about a seat position was quickly spiraling into something much more serious. The calm, routine atmosphere of the flight had completely evaporated, replaced by a tense energy that seemed to spread through the cabin like a wave. Little did anyone realize that this was just the beginning. The next few minutes would transform what should have been a routine cross-country flight into a viral moment that would be discussed and debated across the country. The woman's next actions would not only impact everyone on board, but would also spark a larger conversation about behavior, respect, and the limits of personal rights in shared spaces. The plane hit another patch of turbulence, causing the seat belt signs to illuminate with a soft ding. The captain's voice came over the intercom, his tone professional but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected rough air. Please return to your seats and fasten your seat belts immediately." Most passengers quickly complied, gripping their armrests as the plane gently rocked. But the woman in row 23 had reached her breaking point. Despite the turbulence, she suddenly stood up, bracing herself against the seat in front of her. Her laptop nearly slipped from her tray table as the plane jerked again. "I need to use the restroom right now," she announced loudly, though the bathroom sign clearly showed occupied. The senior flight attendant, a gentleman with silver-streaked hair and decades of experience in his careful movements, approached her with careful steps. "Ma'am, I apologize, but you need to be seated right now. It's for your own safety," he explained, his voice carrying the kind of patience that comes from years of handling difficult situations. The plane shuddered again, and several passengers gasped. The woman pulled out her phone, holding it up like a shield. "Everyone needs to see this," she declared, starting to live stream. "This is what happens when you give people a little bit of authority. They think they can control everything you do." The cabin had gone eerily quiet except for the rumble of turbulence and the sound of her voice. A young mother pulled her sleeping toddler closer. An elderly couple exchanged worried glances. A teenager 2 rows back stopped playing his game and pulled out his earbuds, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. "I have a constitutional right to stand if I want to," she continued, her voice growing louder as she spoke directly into her phone. "These airlines think they can treat us like cattle, but I know my rights." The senior flight attendant maintained his composure, though concern flickered across his face. "Ma'am, this isn't about rights. This is about safety, your safety and the safety of everyone on this plane." A businessman in the aisle seat tried to reason with her. "Please, just sit down. We're all trying to get through this turbulence." His words were met with an icy glare as she continued filming. "Look at this, everyone. Now they're having other passengers gang up on me." She turned back to her phone. "This is what happens when people don't question authority. They just follow blindly, like sheep." The turbulence increased, causing drinks to slosh in cups and overhead bins to creak. Still, she remained standing, one hand gripping the seat while the other held her phone steady. Her business suit, pristine at takeoff, was now wrinkled from the confrontation. Other passengers had begun filming too, sensing that something unprecedented was unfolding. The flight attendants exchanged meaningful looks, and the senior crew member picked up the intercom phone, speaking in hushed tones. "This is going viral," the woman declared, a strange mix of anger and triumph in her voice. "Everyone's going to see how airlines really treat their passengers. I paid for this seat, and I have the right to use it how I want." The plane dropped suddenly, causing several passengers to yelp. The woman stumbled but kept filming. "See? They're probably doing this on purpose. They're trying to force me to sit down, but I won't be intimidated." What she didn't notice was the subtle movement near the back of the plane. 2 passengers who had been quietly observing the situation were now watching with focused attention, their hands resting on their seatbelt buckles. They weren't ordinary passengers. Their presence would soon become very clear to everyone on board. The tension in the cabin had reached a fever pitch. Every passenger could sense that this situation had moved beyond a simple disagreement about airline rules. The woman's live stream was capturing every moment, but she hadn't realized that her viral moment would become famous for reasons very different from what she intended. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom again, this time with a note of finality. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to the current situation, we will be making an unscheduled landing at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened." A collective groan rippled through the cabin. A young professional in the front checked his watch anxiously. He'd missed his meeting in New York. A grandmother in row 15 pulled out her phone, probably to text family members about the delay. But these minor inconveniences were about to be overshadowed by what happened next. The 2 quiet passengers who had been observing the situation made their move. They stood up slowly, reaching into their jackets to pull out their credentials. "Federal Air Marshals," announced the first one, his voice calm but commanding. "Ma'am, you need to take your seat immediately." The woman's live stream captured the sudden shift in the cabin's atmosphere. Her phone trembled slightly, but she kept recording. "Look at this, everyone. They're bringing in armed officers just because I stood up for my rights." The female air marshal stepped forward, her tone professional but firm. "This isn't about rights anymore. This is about the safety of everyone on this aircraft. Please sit down and put your phone away." The plane had begun its descent into Chicago, the subtle change in pressure making ears pop. Outside the windows, the bright day had given way to a layer of clouds as they descended. The woman's defiance seemed to waver for the first time as she glanced at the increasingly closer ground. You can't do this, she insisted, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. I'm just trying to show people what's really happening on these flights. A burst of turbulence rocked the plane as they passed through the cloud layer. The air marshals maintained their positions, one on either side of row 23, their training evident in their steady stance despite the plane's movement. The senior flight attendant returned, speaking in low tones with the air marshals. Other passengers watched in tense silence, some still recording, others trying to distract their children from the unfolding scene. We're live streaming everything, the woman reminded everyone, her phone still raised. The whole world is watching how you're treating a paying customer. Ma'am, the male air marshal said quietly, you're interfering with the flight crew's ability to perform their duties. That's a federal offense. Please sit down and put your phone away. Don't make this situation any more serious than it already is. The plane banked left, beginning its final approach to O'Hare. Through the windows, passengers could see the sprawling Chicago cityscape coming into view. The woman finally seemed to realize the gravity of her situation as she looked at the faces around her. Not angry faces, but tired, concerned, and disappointed ones. An elderly man across the aisle spoke up, his voice gentle. Young lady, sometimes it's better to just take a deep breath and think about tomorrow. Is this really worth it? For a moment, something flickered across the woman's face, perhaps the first hint of doubt about her actions. The air marshals noticed it too, maintaining their calm but ready presence. The captain's voice came over the intercom one final time. Flight attendants, prepare for landing. As the plane descended toward Chicago, the woman slowly sank back into her seat, though her phone continued recording. The air marshals remained standing, watching carefully. The other passengers sat in silence, all of them knowing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for days to come. The woman might have thought she was creating content for social media, but she had no idea that in just a few hours, her video would go viral for all the wrong reasons. As the plane's wheels touched down on O'Hare's runway, this incident was about to move into its next phase, one that would turn a simple flight delay into a national conversation about behavior, consequences, and the power of viral moments in modern society. The plane had barely come to a complete stop at the gate when the familiar ding of the seatbelt sign turning off was quickly followed by an unusual announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Local law enforcement will be boarding the aircraft momentarily. Through the windows, passengers could see several Chicago Police Department vehicles with flashing lights positioned near the jet bridge. The morning sun reflected off their white and blue patrol cars, creating an almost cinematic scene on the tarmac. The woman in row 23 was still recording, but her earlier bravado had been replaced by something more nervous. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted her suit jacket, though she kept her phone steady. The air marshals remained positioned nearby, their presence a quiet reminder of the gravity of the situation. The distinct sound of heavy footsteps coming down the jet bridge echoed through the now silent cabin. When the aircraft door opened, 3 Chicago police officers boarded, their badges catching the morning light as they made their way down the aisle. A young boy whispered too loudly to his mother, "Are they going to arrest her?" His mother quickly shushed him, but the question seemed to hang in the air, adding to the tension. The lead officer, a tall woman with a commanding presence, spoke clearly. "Ma'am, we need you to gather your belongings and come with us." Her tone was professional, but left no room for argument. The woman stood slowly, still filming. "I want everyone to see this," she declared, her voice wavering slightly despite her attempt to sound confident. "This is what happens when you stand up for yourself in America." As she reached for her laptop bag, her hands trembled. A business card slipped from her pocket, floating to the floor like a fallen leaf. Nobody moved to pick it up. "I'm being arrested for knowing my rights," she announced to her phone, her voice growing louder with each word. "This is what happens when sheep follow orders. Remember my face. This is what freedom looks like." An older passenger nearby couldn't help but mutter, "That's not what freedom looks like, dear. That's what consequences look like. Several passengers had their phones out now, recording the scene from different angles. The woman's impromptu speech would soon be viewed from multiple perspectives across social media platforms. The officers waited patiently as she gathered her belongings, one of them helping to retrieve her carry-on bag from the overhead compartment. The air marshals stayed close, their trained eyes watching for any sudden movements. As they began to escort her off the plane, she continued her performance for the camera. "They're removing me because I refused to be silenced, because I dared to question authority." The grandmother in row 15 shook her head sadly, turning to her seatmate. All this over a reclined seat during meal service. What's happening to people these days? The woman's voice echoed back from the jet bridge as she was led away. "Share this video. The world needs to see what's really happening on these flights." After she was gone, the cabin remained eerily quiet for a moment. Then, like a dam breaking, whispered conversations erupted throughout the plane. Flight attendants began moving through the aisles, checking on passengers and answering questions about connecting flights. A teenager in the back, who had recorded everything, was already uploading his video to social media. "This is going to blow up," he told his seatmate. He had no idea just how right he was. The pilot's voice came over the intercom one final time. "Folks, we apologize for this unfortunate delay. We'll be continuing to New York shortly with a new flight crew. Thank you for your patience and understanding during this situation." As ground crew members began servicing the plane for its continued journey, passengers settled in for the wait, many of them already sharing their experiences on various social media platforms. What had started as a simple disagreement about a seat position was about to become one of the most viral airplane incidents of the year, sparking debates across the country about personal rights, public behavior, and the role of social media in modern conflicts. Within hours of the incident, videos from multiple angles flooded social media platforms. The teenager's upload from the back of the plane hit 1 million views before he even landed in New York. His simple caption, "Plane Karen refuses to follow rules, gets arrested," became the trending topic of the day. The woman's own livestream took on a life of its own, though perhaps not in the way she had intended. Her dramatic exit lines, "Remember my face. This is what freedom looks like," quickly became an internet meme. People began using the phrase ironically in their own videos, applying it to everything from minor inconveniences to silly everyday situations. A popular content creator with millions of followers shared the clip, adding thoughtful commentary about airline safety and passenger responsibility. "It's not about freedom," she explained in her viral response video. "It's about everyone's right to a safe flight. When you're 30,000 feet in the air, following safety rules isn't optional. It's essential." News channels picked up the story, running it on their evening broadcasts. Aviation experts were called in to explain airline policies, while social media specialists analyzed how such incidents go viral. One commentator noted, "What's fascinating is how quickly the public sentiment formed. People aren't just watching anymore. They're judging, sharing, and shaping the narrative in real time." The woman's employer, a prestigious marketing firm, released a brief statement. "We are aware of the incident involving our employee and are taking appropriate action." By the next morning, her company biography had been removed from their website. But the story took an unexpected turn when a flight attendant support group shared the video, sparking a broader conversation about the increasing challenges faced by airline crew members. "This isn't just about one incident," their post read. "This is about a growing pattern of behavior that puts everyone at risk." Comments flooded in from flight attendants worldwide, sharing their own experiences. A veteran flight attendant's response went viral. "We're not here to take away your rights. We're here to get you home safely to your families. That's all we've ever wanted to do." The incident sparked serious discussions about air rage and passenger behavior. Aviation authorities used the video in training materials, showing how quickly situations can escalate and how professionally the crew and air marshals handled it. 3 days after the incident, When the woman appeared for her initial court hearing on federal charges, she looked very different from the defiant figure in the viral videos. Her lawyer released a brief statement. "My client regrets her actions and acknowledges the importance of airline safety protocols." But perhaps the most meaningful impact came from unexpected places. Middle school teachers began using the incident in their lessons about digital citizenship and responsible social media use. "Every action you take can be recorded and shared," one teacher told her class. "But more importantly, every action affects the people around you." A month later, a documentary filmmaker interviewed passengers from the flight for a short film about modern air travel and social behavior. The grandmother from row 15 summed it up perfectly. "You know what struck me most? How one person's actions affected over 200 people that day. We all missed our connections, our meetings, our families, all because someone forgot that being part of society means considering others." The incident became a case study in crisis management courses and social media marketing classes. Students analyzed how quickly online narratives form and how public behavior can impact personal and professional lives in the digital age. The final twist came 6 months later. The woman, having completed an anger management course and paid her fines, wrote a thoughtful post on a professional networking site. "I learned the hard way that true freedom comes with responsibility," she reflected. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you were wrong." Her post didn't go viral like her original video, but it reached the people who needed to see it most, including the flight crew from that day. The senior flight attendant's response was simple but powerful. "Thank you for your honesty. Safe travels." As the story faded from headlines, it left behind important lessons about patience, respect, and the real meaning of freedom in our interconnected world. In an age where anyone can become an instant celebrity for the wrong reasons, it reminded everyone that our choices affect not just ourselves, but everyone around us, both in the air and on the ground.